On a night that would forever be etched in infamy, August 14th, 2021, a man walked into his home, his clothes soaked in blood. The air was thick with tension as his wife, Chelanda Rhodess, reached for the phone, her hands trembling. Her voice, a mix of fear and urgency, pierced through the silence as she dialed 911. "My husband just got home. He said he had to finish it." The words hung heavy in the air, a chilling prelude to the events that would unfold. Before we continue with this twisted tale, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? We would love to know how wide our videos get. At 11:06 p.m., the stillness of the night was shattered by a 911 call from South Holstead Street. Chelanda Rhodess' voice, filled with a mix of fear and urgency, echoed through the dispatcher's headphones. She reported that her husband, Otis Rhodess, had just come home, his clothes drenched in blood. The gravity of her words was palpable, and the dispatcher's response was swift. Within minutes, the blue and red lights of police cars illuminated the quiet street, their sirens piercing the night. The officers arrived to find Otis sitting calmly on the front steps of the trailer, his blood-stained clothes a stark contrast to his composed demeanor. There was no panic, no resistance. He simply sat, waiting for the authorities, as if he had been expecting them. It was a peculiar sight, one that raised more questions than it answered. Why would a man, allegedly involved in a violent crime, sit so quietly, almost resigned to his fate, inside the trailer? The scene was equally perplexing. Blood-soaked clothing was found in the washing machine, the water inside a dark, reddish-brown. A red-streaked towel lay in the bathroom, silent evidence of a desperate attempt to clean up. The officers moved methodically, collecting evidence, their minds racing with possibilities. Otis was detained and taken for questioning, his calmness under scrutiny. As the officers continued with the initial investigation, the questions began to pile up. Why would a man clean up and then sit quietly waiting for the police? Was it guilt, or was it something else? The blood on his clothes, the calm demeanor, the cleaned-up scene, each element seemed to point in a different direction. Was Otis a cold-blooded killer, or was he a pawn in a much larger game? The initial investigation was just the beginning, a glimpse into a web of lies and contradictions that would gradually unfold. The blood-stained clothes, the calmness, the cleaned-up scene, each piece of evidence was a puzzle waiting to be solved. The calmness of Otis, the cleaned-up scene, the blood-stained clothes, each element seemed to point in a different direction, leading to a mystery that would take them on a harrowing journey to uncover the truth. As the initial shock of the evening began to settle, the night took a darker turn. Just a little over an hour later, at 12:31 a.m., another 911 call crackled through the dispatcher's radio. This time, the call came from a gas station on West 63rd Street. A night shift clerk, voice trembling with fear, reported a body found behind the building near the dumpsters. The quiet of the night was shattered once more as emergency responders rushed to the scene. When they arrived, what they found was a chilling sight. Lying near the concrete wall behind the dumpster enclosure was the lifeless body of a man. Emory Gant, 39 years old, had suffered blunt force trauma to the head and neck. His injuries were severe, and it was clear that he had not survived the attack. There were no signs of struggle, no defensive wounds on his hands or arms, suggesting a sudden and overpowering assault. His clothes were blood-soaked around the upper chest and shoulders, but oddly, there were no obvious signs of robbery. His wallet, containing cash, was still in his pocket, but his phone was nowhere to be found. The discovery of Emory Gant's body sent shockwaves through the investigation. The timing and proximity of the two incidents were undeniable. The road residence on South Holstead Street was located just over 1.5 miles from the gas station. The fact that Otis was found with blood-soaked clothing, coupled with his wife's statement and his own silence, made him the immediate focus of the investigation. The pieces seemed to fit, but something didn't quite add up. And just like that, a body connects Otis to a brutal murder. Or so it seems. The evidence was damning, but as investigators began to piece together the timeline, they couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than met the eye. Was Otis a cold-blooded killer, or was he a pawn in a much larger game? The investigation took on a new urgency as detectives secured surveillance footage from surrounding businesses near both locations. The The primary focus became establishing a timeline of Otis Rhodess's movements on the night of the killing. His clothes, now in evidence, were fast-tracked for DNA and blood analysis. The key question was whether the blood on the clothing belonged to the victim, and whether it could be linked to a direct act of violence. As the investigation continued, the layers of this complex case began to peel back, revealing a story of betrayal, manipulation, and a desperate attempt to cover up a crime. The blood-stained clothes, the tense atmosphere, and the haunting 911 call were just the beginning. The truth, as it often is, was far more complicated than it seemed at first glance. The journey to uncover the truth is just beginning, and it's a journey you won't want to miss. Otis Rhodess sat in the interrogation room, the cold, sterile environment doing little to ease the tension in the air. His eyes, though calm, held a flicker of uncertainty as he recounted his evening to the detectives. "I left around 9:30 to get smoke," he said, his voice steady. "Came back an hour later." It was a simple statement, one that would soon become a crucial piece of the puzzle. The detectives, their faces etched with the weight of the case, moved with a sense of urgency. They pulled surveillance footage from the Family Dollar store and nearby businesses on West 67th Street. The grainy images flickered on the screen, each frame a potential clue. The timeline matched Otis's story. He was seen entering the store at 9:47 p.m., purchasing a pack of cigarettes and a bottle of soda, and exiting at 9:58 p.m. His clothes were clean, his demeanor relaxed. There was no blood, no panic, no sign of the man who would soon be accused of a brutal murder. As the investigation continued, the medical examiner's report added another layer to the mystery. The time of death was ruled to be around 10:40 p.m. By that time, Otis was already on camera, walking away from the crime scene, his path clear and his presence accounted for. The evidence seemed to point in two different directions. On one hand, there was the blood-stained clothing, the calm demeanor, the cleaned-up scene. On the other, there was the surveillance footage, the timeline, the lack of any visible injuries or panic. The detectives found themselves at a crossroads. If Otis didn't do it, who did? The question hung in the air, a haunting whisper that refused to be ignored. The evidence was there, but so were the contradictions. Stay with us as we reveal more chilling details of this case, a case that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about trust and deception. The investigation took yet a turn that no one saw coming. The blood-stained clothes, the very evidence that seemed to seal Otis's fate, began to reveal a different story. The forensic lab worked tirelessly, analyzing every fiber, every drop of blood. The results were both surprising and perplexing. The blood on the clothes belonged to Emory Gant, the victim, but there was no trace of Otis's DNA. Not a single strand of hair, no epithelial cells, no sweat residue. It was as if the clothes had never been worn during a struggle. The blood spatter patterns told an even more intriguing tale. The forensic experts explained that the blood on the clothes was not the result of a violent confrontation. Instead, it appeared that the garments had been soaked in blood after the murder. The washing machine, too, held no traces of Otis's DNA. There was no evidence of a cleanup attempt, no indication that Otis had worn the clothes during the crime. It was as if the entire scene had been meticulously staged. This wasn't the killer's laundry. It was a performance, the lead detective mused, his voice heavy with the weight of the revelation. The more they uncovered, the more the case seemed to defy logic. The blood-stained clothes, the calm demeanor, the cleaned-up scene, each element seemed to point in a different direction. Was Otis a cold-blooded killer, or was he a pawn in a much larger game? As the investigation continued, the detectives began to piece together a different narrative. The evidence suggested that someone had gone to great lengths to frame Otis for a crime he didn't commit. The staged crime scene, the blood-soaked clothes, the calm demeanor. Each piece of the puzzle fit together to form a picture of a desperate attempt to divert suspicion. The forensic findings raised more questions than they answered. If Otis didn't commit the murder, who did? And why go to such lengths to frame him? The investigation took on a new urgency as the detectives delved deeper into the lives of the people involved. The truth, as it often is, was far more complicated than it seemed at first glance. This case will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about trust and deception, and it's a journey you won't want to miss. As the investigation continued to unfold, The focus shifted from the physical evidence to the digital trail left behind by Chelanda Rhodess. The forensic team, armed with a digital search warrant, delved deep into the contents of her phone. What they uncovered would prove to be a game-changer in the case. Deleted texts were meticulously recovered, each message a piece of the puzzle. Among them were messages to Emory Gant, arranging a late-night meetup. The words on the screen were stark and revealing, painting a picture of a secret rendezvous that would end in tragedy. The messages were clear. Chelanda had been in contact with the victim, and she had been planning to meet him. But the digital evidence didn't stop there. GPS data from Chelanda's phone placed her near the gas station at 10:38 p.m., just minutes before the estimated time of death. The timeline was undeniable, and it raised more questions than it answered. How did Chelanda's movements align with the crime? And what did she know that she wasn't telling? The most shocking discovery, however, was a photograph of Emory Gant's body, time-stamped at 10:48 p.m. The image, found in her deleted files, was a chilling piece of evidence. She knew where the body was before anyone else did. The implications were staggering. If Chelanda had taken the photo at the gas station, it meant she was at the scene of the crime. It meant she had seen the body before it was officially discovered. The digital trail was a labyrinth of secrets and lies, each piece of evidence pointing to Chelanda's involvement. The deleted text, the GPS data, the photograph, each element was a thread in a web of deception. The more the investigators uncovered, the more they realized that Chelanda's story was riddled with inconsistencies. She had claimed to be at home all evening, but the evidence told a different story. The cracks in Chelanda's story were beginning to show, and the investigators were determined to uncover the truth. The digital evidence was a smoking gun, a clear indication that Chelanda had more to do with the murder than she had let on. The question now was, what had really happened that night? As the investigation pressed on, the layers of Chelanda's story began to peel back, revealing a tale of betrayal, manipulation, and a desperate attempt to cover up a crime. The weight of the evidence bore down on Chelanda Rhodess, like a vice. Confronted with the digital and forensic findings, she found herself cornered, with nowhere to run and no more lies to tell. The calm facade she had maintained began to crack, revealing the desperation and fear that had been lurking beneath the surface. It was a moment of reckoning, a pivotal point in the investigation where the truth could no longer be hidden. Chelanda's confession came in fits and starts, her voice trembling as she recounted the events of that fateful night. She admitted to meeting Emory Gant, not out of friendship or coincidence, but to settle a dispute. Emory had been blackmailing her over a fraudulent tax scheme, a dark secret from her past that she had hoped to keep buried. The pressure had been mounting, and the meeting was meant to be a final attempt to resolve the issue once and for all. But things didn't go as planned. The confrontation escalated quickly. In a moment of panic, Chelanda grabbed a metal pipe and struck Emory. She didn't mean to kill him, she claimed, but the blow was fatal. The reality of what she had done hit her, like a ton of bricks. And in that moment, her desperation took over. Panicked and terrified, Chelanda devised a plan to save herself. She dumped Emory's body behind the gas station, hoping to buy herself some time. Then, she returned home and staged a scene to frame Otis. She bloodied his clothes, placed them in the washing machine, and called 911, hoping to divert suspicion away from herself and onto her husband. It was a desperate attempt to cover up her crime, a gamble that nearly destroyed an innocent man. The murder weapon, a metal pipe, was recovered behind their trailer. It was a damning piece of evidence, with Chelanda's fingerprints and Emory's blood. The forensic analysis was irrefutable, and the pieces of the puzzle finally began to fit together. Chelanda's confession was the final piece, the one that brought clarity to the chaos. In her attempt to save herself, she nearly destroyed an innocent man, the lead detective remarked, his voice heavy with the weight of the revelation. The investigation had taken a harrowing turn, uncovering a web of lies and deceit that had nearly sent an innocent man to prison. The truth, as it often is, was far more complicated than it seemed at first glance. As the investigation came to a close, the impact of Chelanda's actions reverberated through the lives of those involved. Otis, now cleared of any wrongdoing, was left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. Chelanda, on the other hand, faced the consequences of her actions, her future uncertain. The courtroom was a hive of activity, the air thick with tension as the trial of Chelanda Rhodess began. The charges against her were grave: second-degree murder, obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and filing a false police report. Each count a heavy burden. Each one a testament to the complexity and severity of the case that had captivated the city. Chelanda's defense team painted a picture of a woman driven to the brink by psychological distress. They argued that she had acted out of fear and desperation, not malice. They painted a portrait of a woman pushed to her limits, forced to make impossible choices in the face of overwhelming pressure. But the evidence against her was overwhelming, a mountain of facts that seemed insurmountable. The prosecution laid out their case methodically, piece by piece. They presented the digital evidence, the deleted texts, the GPS data, and the damning photograph. They detailed the forensic findings, the bloodstained clothes, the metal pipe with her fingerprints. Each piece of evidence was a brick in the wall of their case, building an unassailable structure of proof. The jury listened intently, their faces a mask of concentration as they weighed the evidence. The defense fought valiantly, but the facts were undeniable. After days of testimony, the jury retired to deliberate. The wait was agonizing, the courtroom a tense silence punctuated only by the occasional whisper. When the jury returned, their verdict was unanimous: guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted in a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that justice had been served, sorrow for the lives irrevocably changed by the events of that fateful night. The sentencing was swift and severe. Chelanda was sentenced to 28 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 19 years. The judge's voice was firm as he delivered the sentence, his words a reflection of the gravity of the crime and the methodical deception that had followed. In the end, Chelanda's attempt to save herself had only led to her downfall. Her actions, driven by fear and desperation, had nearly destroyed an innocent man and had left a trail of destruction in their wake. The courtroom was a place of reckoning, a place where the truth was laid bare and justice was served. As the trial came to a close, the impact of the case lingered. The lives of those involved would never be the same, their futures forever altered by the events that had unfolded. The journey to uncover the truth had been harrowing, but in the end, justice had prevailed. As the dust settled on the courtroom drama, the focus shifted to Otis Rhodess, the man who had been wrongfully accused, who had faced the possibility of a lifetime behind bars for a crime he didn't commit. The charges against him were dropped, a decision that came with a public apology from the DA's office. Words that, while necessary, could never truly erase the trauma he had endured. Otis chose to move on, to leave behind a city that had nearly consumed him. He relocated to Augusta, Georgia, a place where he could start anew, where the shadows of his past couldn't reach him. It was a difficult decision, one filled with a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief at being free, sorrow for the life he had known and the time he had lost. In Augusta, Otis found a small, quiet community that welcomed him with open arms. He kept to himself, preferring the solitude that allowed him to heal. The memories of what happened in Chicago were always with him, a constant reminder of how close he had come to losing everything. His life was forever marked by a betrayal that had nearly cost him everything, a betrayal that had been orchestrated by someone he had trusted. The public apology from the DA's office was a small comfort, a recognition of the wrong that had been done. But for Otis, the road to recovery was a long one. He found solace in simple things, in the quiet of the mornings and the peace of the evenings. He built a new life, one step at a time, always mindful of fragility of trust and the importance of truth. In the end, Otis Rhodess walked free, a testament to the power of perseverance and the importance of seeking justice. His journey was far from over, but he had taken the first steps towards reclaiming his life. And as he looked to the future, he did so with a renewed sense of purpose and a determination to never let the past define him. As we reach the end of this harrowing tale, we're left with a profound sense of the fragility of our justice system and the dangers that lurk within it. False accusations, like the one that nearly destroyed Otis Rhodess, are a stark reminder of how easily lives can be upended by deceit and manipulation. The system, designed to protect and serve, can sometimes be tested to its limits, revealing vulnerabilities that must be acknowledged and addressed. In this case, It was the meticulous work of forensic experts and the irrefutable nature of digital evidence that ultimately saved the day. The blood-soaked lie that Chelanda Rhodess spun was intricate and almost convincing. She staged the crime scene, planted evidence, and even called 911 to frame her own husband. But in the end, the truth had a trail she couldn't erase. The digital footprints, the forensic findings, and the relentless pursuit of justice by the investigators all converged to reveal the truth. Chelanda's blood-soaked lie almost worked, but the truth had a trail she couldn't erase. The forensic integrity of the evidence and the digital trail left behind were the tools that tipped the scales in favor of justice. They uncovered the layers of deception and brought to light the desperate attempts to cover up a heinous crime. What do you think tipped investigators off? Was it the digital evidence, the forensic findings, or something else entirely? And what would you have done in Otis's shoes? Drop your thoughts below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this one. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you will be able to see our video again. Stay tuned for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat, questioning what you thought you knew. Until then, stay safe, stay curious.